views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BXRx, BronxNet special coverage, providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually during the pandemic. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and today is Tuesday, March 9th. Coming up, we'll discuss HOSTOS Center for Bronx Nonprofit's third annual Women's Resilience Conference to commemorate Women's History Month. Then, the Philippines is currently going through a human rights crisis, and our New York City tax dollars have something to do with it. We'll learn more about this and the Philippine Human Rights Act later on. After that, 12 months into the pandemic, tenants and organizers continue to call for rent cancellation. We'll discuss the proposed cancel rent bill with Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. And we'll learn more about a new Black woman-owned studio space in Harlem, offering services to the creative community with real gems. So please, stick around. Open BXRX starts now. Welcome to Open BXRX on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, inviting you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. March is Women's History Month, a time to highlight the contributions of women in our society. The HOSTOS Center for Bronx Nonprofits is holding its third annual Women's Resilience Conference to share the experiences of women embracing their place as leaders in their communities. Joining us now to share more is Eileen Newman, Executive Director at HOSTOS Center for Bronx Nonprofits, and also the host of Mission BX here at BronxNet. Welcome, Eileen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. This is so much fun to be the one answering the questions.
You're on the opposite end today.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. So first, Eileen, can you please share more about HOSTOS Center for Bronx Nonprofits and the ongoing work at the center, especially during this pandemic?
So the center started actually almost in May, it'll be 9 years ago. And it was started as a response to the fact that there was very little opportunity for professional development in the Bronx. So we created ourselves to provide those opportunities, and we've gone on to do leadership programming, but more and more as the years have gone by, we've gotten involved in the community. So when the pandemic hit, first of all, it was 2 weeks before our Women's Resilience Conference. So it was so painful on so many levels. And so, we decided at that point, we weren't ready to do anything remotely. We didn't even know what Zoom was. So but what we did start to do is look at what people really needed. And we did surveys to find out what people were most concerned about. Of course, at the beginning, a lot of it was about budgets and are we going out of business and small nonprofits. But as the year progressed, and I can't believe I'm saying a year, but as the year progressed, we found that one of the big issues that people were facing were issues around mental health. And so we, with the help of New York Community Trust, who funded some of our speakers, put together a series of workshops around mental health, around anxiety, general for everyone. But then we looked at different populations, older people, small children, young people in college or in high school, and they have been incredibly popular. And so we did that starting in March and April, and then we've just rebegun our next series. And this time we're also looking at returning to work and what are the issues around that. So
thank you, Eileen, for sharing. And as we know, the 2021 Women's Resilience Conference is coming up, and you've shifted a few things over to the Zoom and virtual reality. Can you tell us more about the upcoming event?
So we're not sure about whether we could do this virtually or not, because a lot of it is about networking. But then we decided we were going to, and we went back to the people who were going to be our speakers for the most part, and asked them if they would be willing to do it virtually. And people said yes. We changed some of it. It's usually an all-day event. This is 9 to 12. But we also, another thing that we did was we brought in somebody to help us with all the nuts and bolts pieces, like getting everybody in rooms, and so that we could incorporate networking, because this is a huge networking event. We had, the first year we did it, we had 200 people, and we had food, and people were there all day, and so we needed to give it that sense that people were connecting.
Right, absolutely. And I'm
So
glad that it's still taking place virtually.
me too.
Eileen, I think that we can all agree that this past year, women's resilience has reached new heights. As you mentioned, mental health has been a very important subject and
Yes.
topic to explore, whether that be coming from entrepreneurs, educators, leaders in all realms. How would you define resilience in this day and age?
You know, it's amazing, because when I think about people I talk to about how they're doing what they're doing, you know, the stories are just phenomenal and heartbreaking in some cases. People who have lost so many people, and they're still, I mean, I know people who have children they're teaching, they have full-time jobs, and I also teach in a master's program. They're getting their master's degree. So the craziness of the schedule and the amount of stress is extraordinary. And you know, one of the things that somebody said to me a long time ago, when it was a woman who also was going to school at night, working full time, not during the pandemic, but had kids, and she would go home from her classes at 10 o'clock at night, and she would cook so that her kids had food, so that they always had food for, and she'd cook on the weekends for the week. And I said to her, how do you do this? And she said, this is what I have to do for now.
Mm.
And I never forgot that. And I think that's what resilience is. It's saying, I have to do this for now.
Yes.
I can't question how I'm doing it, not me, but these amazing people I'm talking about, but I just have to do it. It's one foot in front of the other.
Wow.
So we're celebrating, so we're celebrating particularly women who are doing that.
As the executive director of CBNP and host of Mission BX, Eileen, an incredible show highlighting nonprofits in our borough here at BronxNet, you often speak with women leaders. What have they shared to be their biggest challenges, especially through the pandemic?
I think for a lot of them, it's juggling, and it doesn't matter how you define family, whether you have children, whether you have a partner, whether you have your family or your friends, your family or your parents who you're caring for. It's the endless juggling. It's a woman who is going to be one of our keynotes, adopted a baby right in the midst of all of this. And she runs a large organization and was part of a food pantry. And she talks about what it was like to go home from being in the food pantry and having to take all of her clothes off, having to give herself a huge shower before she could go and see her baby. And what that whole process is all about. I've talked to women who talk about getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and doing the work that they have to do for their own job, or if they're in school, so that their kids can use the computer, because it doesn't mean that there are computers for everyone in people's houses. There may be only one. And I think that daily resilience of, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it and juggle whatever I have to juggle. And then in the midst of this, there are losses. Yes. You know, people who talk about losing parents, people who talk about losing a brother. There's been so many stories, or having to go to the hospital and be outside the hospital in case there a word about their loved ones. So but people have done remarkable things. And because I deal with the Bronx, you know, these aren't people who get to walk away and go to their lovely safe house in the country, or these are people who have stayed in the Bronx, who have gone through it in the midst of one of the worst things that certainly in my lifetime I've ever seen in this society.
Absolutely. And it's important to also emphasize that. If you can just share, Eileen, some of the keynote speakers that are speaking this year and who they are and their names and all that good stuff.
So we decided this year that usually we have one keynote speaker, but instead what I wanted to do was bring in essential workers from various sectors of what we look at as essential work. So we're bringing in Eileen Torres, who actually is the woman who adopted the baby and was still working at Bronx Works. Eileen is the ED. We always talk about each other as the other Eileen in the Bronx. She is the executive director of Bronx Works, and they do amazing amount of work. And I can't say enough about and the food piece and how it accelerated because there were so many people who needed food. So she's going to talk about that and what Bronx Works has done. Another woman, Judith Gill, who works with people around mental health issues, is going to talk about that and how that accelerated. And then we have Patricia Quinn. Patricia was, at the time that the pandemic hit, a neonatal nurse dealing with premature babies. And then her hospital shifted to become almost a COVID hospital. And she then was dealing with COVID patients, people who were dying. And she is another one, and she may say this, when they first asked her to do it, she's one of a number of children, maybe 5 or so. And she went to her mother and said, how am I going to do this? And her mother said, you're a leader. And that's what leaders do. Yeah.
Wow.
So
wow, these are incredible.
I know.
Incredible stories to hear.
I know.
Thank you for sharing.
The Women's Resilience Conferences bring tissues. It's a tissue event.
I have goosebumps and it hasn't even started yet.
I know. I have to always try to hold myself together. So it's
Eileen, without further ado, I know folks are watching and they're wondering, when is it taking place? How can I tune in? Please invite our viewers to RSVP and join the Women's Resilience
So
Conference.
I think that in somewhere in here, there's going to be a flyer about it. But it is March 12th, 9 to 12. And you can, if the flyer doesn't stay up long enough or people don't get to see it, you can email Meredith, who works with me. So it's MINOGUE at hostos.cuny.edu. And just say you heard about it, you want to register, and it's free. It's and actually Meredith, this is another surprise, incredible woman, works. It's Meredith and I who are the Center for Bronx Nonprofits, but Meredith is also a singer-songwriter. So to the end of the conference, Meredith is going to sing us out.
Thank you so much, Eileen, for joining us today, and happy Women's History Month to you.
You're welcome, and happy Women's History Month for you too. And I hope I see you.
I'll be there. Eileen Newman is the executive director at HOSTOS Center for Bronx Nonprofits. We'll be right back with Open BXRx.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from Bronxnet, this is Trans.
Welcome back. The Philippines is currently going through a human rights crisis, and our New York City tax dollars have something to do with it. Organizers are now calling for the reintroduction of the Philippine Human Rights Act, which garnered support from Bronx legislators Representatives Ocasio-Cortez and Espaillat last fall. Joining us now to share more is Nikki Pagulayan, an organizer from Anakbayan, New York. Welcome, Nikki. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. To start, can you just tell us about the current state of human rights crisis in the Philippines for those of us who are not familiar?
Yeah, for sure. So in July 2020, the Duterte government had introduced and passed the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. It was widely condemned as sweeping and vague, and because the law redefines terrorism in such a way that even the mildest government critics can be labeled terrorists. So since then, the act has been petitioned in the Supreme Court by over 30 separate petitions to challenge the law, and has become the most challenged law in Philippine history, and is currently undergoing oral argument. But since Duterte has come into power, over 30,000 people, 300,000 people have been, 30,000 people have been killed in Duterte's drug war, over 6,600 drug suspects killed in police operations, over 134,000 anti-drug operations have been conducted, and over 450,000 people have been evacuated from homes and ancestral lands. Hundreds of extrajudicial killings have occurred, and over 2,500 illegal arrests without detention, and close to 1,000 illegal arrests with detention. More recently, on February 15th, elements of the Philippine National Police, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and the paramilitary group entered a refuge for indigenous Lumad youth on a university campus, who formed a bakwit or evacuation school after being displaced by state forces for practicing their right to education in the face of threat by mining corporations looking to take their land. And 26 were arrested, and 7 children were actually illegally transported without their parents' consent. And this is just, sort of one instance of the human rights situation in the Philippines. And it is being challenged internationally, to the point that the UN Human Rights Council has expressed concerns about the anti-terror law. The International Criminal Court prosecutor says there's enough evidence to charge Duterte with crimes against humanity for the war on drugs. Last year, Representative Ilhan Omar wrote a Dear Colleague letter condemning the $2 billion arms sale between the US and the Philippines and other countries. So that really is sort of just a snapshot into the very serious human rights situation in the Philippines.
Thank you for the background, Nikki. This all sounds absolutely terrifying. And, as we stated in the beginning, apparently the United States and New York tax dollars have something to do with this. How long has this been happening, and what is the role of New York tax dollars in this human rights crisis?
So even though the Philippines attained formal independence in 1946, in actuality, the US has never left. It's been able to maintain a military presence through joint military agreements, such as the Visiting Forces Agreement, and also by guiding and supporting counterinsurgency operations in the Philippines. During the Philippine-American War, actually, the US had established the Philippine Constabulary to assist the US military in the war in combating any remaining Philippine Revolutionary Forces. And that constabulary actually transformed to the Philippine National Police, which is now responsible for directing violence against poor and more marginalized the Philippines every day. And it's our US tax dollars that are funding the aid that is backing this violence. So since 2016, the US has sent over $550 million of aid to the Philippine military and police, not including US arms sales. This money is essentially funding the modernization of the Philippine Army and police, responsible for waging the war on drugs, the attack and murder of journalists, land defenders, environmental rights defenders, union leaders, indigenous communities defending their rights to land, and as well as peasant activists and champions of the poor and marginalized. So, and most recently in 2020, the US State Department made a $2 billion arms sale in the midst of the pandemic from weapons manufacturers Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Bell Helicopter, and General Electric with the Philippines that included attack helicopters, Hellfire missiles, weapon systems, machine guns. All these technical equipment meant to quote unquote flatten the revolutionary movement in the Philippines. But in actuality, it's meant to fund, again, the same state forces responsible for silencing the people through imprisonment, torture, displacement, and death, and making the statistics I mentioned earlier possible.
And Nikki, as a U.S. citizen, New Yorker, and vocal advocate for human rights, you have been subject to what's called terror tagging. Can you please share your experience and what exactly this means?
Yeah, so this past October, Anakbayan New York, Anakbayan USA, which is the national organization, were tagged as quote unquote communist front groups, and I, as a terrorist organizer, by a Facebook page called For the Global Public, which is associated actually with the government and its Presidential Communications Operations Office, infamous for carrying out the Duterte government's campaign to terror tag activists and organizations. So I've been organizing on the grassroots for about 6 years now, engaged in fighting for sovereignty in the Philippines, but as well as campaigns locally fighting for the welfare of Filipinos in New York. So I eventually am now joined the ranks of many colleagues and friends who've also been terror tagged by the government. And it was jarring when I first heard the news that I, alongside other national leaders of progressive Filipino organizations here in the US, just to name a few, Bayan USA, Gabriela USA, Migrante USA. But I ultimately wasn't surprised because thousands of activists in the Philippines have already been subject to the same attacks by the Duterte government, as well as activists here have begun to face these attacks. So there was a lot of uncertainty. I felt a lot of fear and anxiety about what this meant to me and what I could continue to do what I do. What would this mean in terms of, could I return to the Philippines without risk of being surveyed or attacked or arrested? But ultimately, I think I still felt the need to keep organizing and not back down because these attacks, are happening as a response by a government that ultimately feels threatened by a Filipino people's movement united across the diaspora, right, against Duterte's fascism and corruption. And that the best safety net that anyone has in these attacks and for any activist is the community and movement that we're a part of. But in large, terror tagging is basically a tactic used to vilify activists. It's a way for the government to blame ordinary people for problems that it's failed to solve. And in the Philippines, it has graver consequences to justify harassment, arrest, assassination even, and to also justify harassment and surveillance of activists overseas. And these attacks in all shapes and forms are backed by our US tax dollars. And that's why the PHRA is so important because it helps ensure that no funding of any kind will go to the Philippines unless these attacks end.
And with that, Nikki, can you please tell us more about the Philippine Human Rights Act and what exactly it calls for? How will it provide solutions to many of these issues that are happening?
So the Philippine Human Rights Act, or the PHRA, calls to suspend U.S. security assistance to the Philippines until such a time as all these human rights violations, all these attacks by Philippine security or state forces cease, and those responsible state forces are held accountable. So it's basically asking that, that these funds are suspended until these human rights violations come to a stop. It's asking that U.S. representatives of different development banks veto loans to the Philippine military and police, and to also ensure that there is a proper investigation and prosecution of members of state forces of the military and police who are credibly found to have violated these human rights, to withdraw the military from domestic policy, and establishing protecting the rights of environmental and land defenders, human rights defenders, farmers, LGBTQ activists, trade unionists, and all critics of the Philippine government. And this is really about ensuring accountability on improving the human rights situation in the Philippines, and to end U.S. taxpayer dollars being used for these violations and attacks when they could be going to social services here. And I think something to know is that the PHRA is a culmination of lessons from many lobbying experiences in recent years to reallocate U.S. military funding to the Philippines. It was introduced to the House by Pennsylvania Representative Susan Wild in the fall of 2020, with the support of many co-sponsors, including New York representatives such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Estella, and Nidia Velasquez. But unfortunately, we couldn't secure from a Republican co-sponsor before last year ended. But Representative Wild plans to reintroduce it to the House this year. And so we really need that community support to encourage all of our New York House representatives to co-sponsor the PHRA, especially.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I wish we had more time to explore more of the issues, but I would love to invite our viewers to learn more and support the Philippine Human Rights Act. How can they do that today?
So you don't have to be Filipino to care about the Philippines. If you believe that U.S. tax dollars shouldn't go towards human rights violations in the Philippines and should be redirected towards social services and serving the needs of our community, especially in the midst of this health and economic crisis. If you believe in human rights and want to support the cause of freedom and democracy in the Philippines, then join the fight to pass the PHRA. So individuals can support by joining the New York FRA Coalition. There's many different working groups, and there's also opportunities to provide resources and support for the campaign, telling other people, providing venues in the future, supplies, monetary and in-kind donations. Organizations can support by hosting a presentation about the PHRA or even endorsing the PHRA or fundraising to support the PHRA. To check out the national campaign, people can visit humanrightsph.org, and you can also follow the New York FRA Coalition at New York for PHRA.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for joining us today and sharing more about this movement.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Nikki Pagulayan is an organizer at Anakbayan, New York. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back on Open BXRx.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash your hands frequently, learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
There's a special election on Tuesday, March 23rd, and if you live in any of these neighborhoods, you'll want to pay attention. Your councilman, Andrew Cohen, is now a judge, and there are 5 candidates looking to replace him. Whoever wins on March 23rd will join New York City's primary lawmaking body, making decisions that affect you, your family, your home, and even your workplace. Starting in 2021, New York City will use ranked choice voting in primary and special elections for local offices. Ranked choice voting simply means that voters can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference, instead of casting a vote for just one. You can still vote for just one candidate if you prefer. You can learn everything there is to know about the District 11 City Council race and the candidates by visiting ballotpedia.org and riverdalepress.com. Stay informed, and most importantly, make sure you mail your absentee ballot the day before Election Day on March 23rd, or safely head out to the polls to have your vote count and your voice heard. Welcome back. 12 months into this pandemic, tenants and organizers continue to call for rent cancellation. With the federal moratorium on evictions set to expire at the end of March, an estimated 10 million renters were behind on payment at the beginning of 2021. And here in the Bronx, unemployment rate is at the highest of all counties at 15.1%. Joining us now to share more is Juan Nuñez, Housing Committee President at Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. Hi, Juan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. So Juan, recently Northwest Bronx and CASA held a statewide campaign of actions, one being here in the Bronx. Can you please tell us about these rallies first?
Yeah, of course. So Northwest Bronx and CASA, we're part of a broader coalition of organizations called Housing Justice for All. And yesterday we held a bunch of rallies, not just in the Bronx, but throughout the state, throughout the day, to bring attention to this bill, this cancel rent bill, but also to bring more attention to all the elected officials in the state that we need to do something about the housing crisis, about the fact that so many people owe rent, and you need to pass this bill. So yesterday was the culmination of all the organizations getting together and different elected officials' offices to show demand for this bill.
Got it. And essentially, how long have advocates been asking for this rent cancellation? As we stated in the beginning, an estimated 10 million renters were behind on rent payment beginning in this year. What are some of the hardships that renters face?
Well, I mean, we started as soon as the pandemic started, which was around March of 2020. We immediately shifted gears to pushing for a cancel rent a bill immediately, because so many of our people, of our communities were affected by this pandemic, weren't able to go to work. A lot of people lost their jobs, like you said earlier, but the Bronx was hit specifically hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. So a lot of tenants right now are getting eviction notices or non-payment notices. And right now they are afraid that they're going to be evicted out of their homes during a global pandemic. And they're very anxious. People are going through a lot right now as far as coming up with the money to pay for the rent. So we feel like this is the right bill for all tenants throughout the state of New York to be taken care of.
Here in the Bronx, the rally that took place happened at Jeffrey Dinowitz's office, Assembly Member Dinowitz. What has he said in response to these calls to action? Has there been any movement?
Well, we've met with him a few times already. We Northwest Bronx met with him a few months ago to discuss the cancel rent bill. He does not support it. He keeps pushing the rent relief, the Safe Harbor Act that included the rent relief program back in the summer. He keeps saying that that's going to work, something around that it's going to work, but it's not. And he's pretty much ignoring us at this point. We showed up to his office yesterday to make sure he knows that we're still here, for him to hear us, but he doesn't believe that the cancel rent bill is the right one. Unfortunately, he's wrong. The rent relief program from the summer was a disaster. Out of the 100 million that was put out there, only 40 million was used, so that left out. Most people couldn't qualify for that program. So right now, him and a lot of the elected officials throughout the state are just not really supporting the bill like they should.
And can you tell us more about this bill? It's called the COVID-19 Housing Relief and Recovery for All Act, aka the Cancel Rent Bill. You can just tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, yes, it's actually called the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act. But you're right. That's the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act, and it was introduced by Assembly Member Eileen New and Senator Julia Salazar from Brooklyn. And what this does, it cancels rent payments and mortgages for small homeowners throughout the pandemic, starting from March 7th until the COVID state emergency crisis ends, and 90 days after that. So what this does, it cancels mortgages for small homeowners. It prevents small homeowners also from accumulating debt, fees, penalties, or bad credit, and that goes for renters too. So renters won't have to pay all that debt, and they won't face any eviction. So this covers it all. This cancel rent bill pretty much covers it all. It includes a relief fund to help small landlords to maintain their buildings and to stay afloat. And I want to emphasize that part of the bill because there's a lot of kind of back and forth about, well, what is it going to do to small homeowners? This leaves them out. It doesn't. It protects small homeowners as well as renters. So I want to make that specifically clear to folks to make sure they don't get some misinformation about the bill.
Yeah, that was definitely my follow-up. Landlords and tenants often get on two different sides of the issue here when it comes to rent cancellation. legislation. And often we see, what about the landlords when you talk about tenant protections? Landlords say that they need the rent and tenants say that they can't pay it. What is the solution and where would the money exactly come from? How simple would it be to acquire it for, our elected officials to get this money?
Well, Governor Cuomo has the executive powers to cancel all rent in the state of New York. And we can use tax increases on the rich to cover this cancel rent bill. And we can also use the federal money. There's $1.4 billion that's about to be given to the state of New York for rent relief. They could use that money to support this bill. So the money is there. And when it comes to the landlords, I'm tired and our tenants are tired of having to prove that we are suffering through a pandemic. We have to fill out forms. We have to, for the rent relief program, we had to submit documents to prove that we're struggling. It's time for the landlords to do that on their own. The small homeowners will be protected. We're going after the giant corporate landlords that have been historically going after Black and brown communities throughout the Bronx. And we want to put the onus on them to have to prove to the state that they need the help with the rent. So that's why it's important that we create a rent relief fund so that the landlords are the ones that have to apply if they're facing the hardship, and then let them deal with the state so then they can receive the funding, the landlords. So this puts it all off. All the tenants all you have to do is cancel the rent for the tenants. They don't have to fill out any forms like they had to in the summer. It's very simple. It puts it all on the landlords to have to do this, not on individual elderly sickly tenants that don't know how to navigate website, don't have the technology to fill out forms. We don't have the men and women power to actually go out there and fill out forms individually. It makes it a lot easier when the landlord is the one that has to apply for the relief and not the individual tenant.
Got it. And as we mentioned, the current eviction moratorium is set to expire on March 31st. Juan, what will this mean for thousands or millions of tenants in the Bronx and across the state? How are these housing courts going to look once that expires?
That's something I am personally trying to figure out how it's going to look at. They're going to be completely flooded. And I want to make something perfectly clear. The moratorium ends May 1st. Tenants have had until February 26th to fill out a hardship form. So the eviction moratorium that was passed back in January, what that does is if a tenant fills out a hardship form, it pushes any potential case against them until May. And I want tenants to really understand that part of it. Yes, you cannot get evicted right now until May 1st, but you have to fill out that hardship form. Landlords are required by law to give you that form, and they are required by law to accept it once you fill it out. If people want more information, you can visit the northwestbronx.org website or the housingjusticeforall.org website. You can fill out a hardship form there, go straight to the housing courts. Just know that if you receive a non-payment notice, that does not mean you have to leave your apartment. You could stay home. You cannot get evicted until you see a judge. All right. And for the thousands of millions of renters in the Bronx, I mean, I work for a pantry here on Webster Avenue where I'm getting 5 to 6 calls a day about rent. I mean, people are already feeling the effects of like depression, anxiety, the trauma that's coming from this pandemic. And on top of that, they have to come up with the money for rent when they weren't able to leave their homes. They weren't supposed to leave their homes for the last year. And then you expect them to come up with this money. A lot of the people in our neighborhoods work in restaurants, they work in salons, they're street vendors. A lot of our Black and brown communities, the folks here in our communities suffered the most with COVID. They got sick, they lost family members. I mean, imagine having to bury somebody through a Zoom call and then you're getting a rent notice or non-payment notice that you had to go to court. Imagine that trauma that you're dealing with, and then on top of that, you have to come up with money for rent somehow magically.
I think it's also important to emphasize that, it's not that tenants and residents don't want to pay their rent, it's that they physically cannot. They genuinely cannot. Some of the stories that I've heard at, the testimonies that a lot of advocates and people in the Bronx have shared has stemmed from them losing their employment during the beginning of the pandemic, them getting sick with COVID and not being qualified to get that job back, not being qualified to apply for rent relief. This is also an issue. We can also emphasize on that, Juan, just about, all the things they have to navigate in order to apply for relief.
Yes. And it's very important also that rent relief program that was released in the summer, the application process, if you were undocumented, you automatically did not qualify. So that left out so many of our people automatically. Number two, during the summer, everybody was getting the extra $600 on their unemployment. the 2 weeks period that the application was out was also the 2 week period where people were getting the extra $600. And if you're getting the extra 600, you automatically didn't qualify. So once you stop getting the 600, then you qualify, but then the program no longer existed. So imagine that you applying, oh, but next week I'll qualify, but there's no application next week. And it wasn't until I think it was November where they re-released it and try to like, but I try to help most of my neighbors apply. None of them got accepted to the rent relief program. And another thing, just because there's been eviction moratorium does not mean that folks are not receiving eviction notices, the non-payment 14-day notice. They're twice as likely, and there was a report done by ABC 7, eviction notices are twice as high in Black and Latino neighborhoods compared to predominantly white neighborhoods. And they're also being filed at a rate at least 5 times higher in the community's poorest neighborhoods. And let me highlight the communities that are being sent the highest eviction notices in the city, all in the Bronx. University Heights, Morris Heights, Highbridge, Belmont, and Morrisania are the neighborhoods that are getting sent the most eviction non-payment notices right now. So I want these all these residents, all the community members that are getting these notices to understand that they cannot evict you until May 1st. Please fill out the hardship form. You cannot get evicted until you see a judge. Do not leave. Do not leave your homes, please.
Thank you so much, Juan, for joining us today. Finally, how can people stay in touch and find out more information on everything we discussed today?
Yes, please visit our website, northwestbronx.org, or at Northwest Bronx on Twitter, or you can go to the housingjusticeforall.org website or follow the tag on Twitter at housing4all.ny. We have all the resources you need in that website and both websites. Please join the movement. We have until May 1st to try to get this passed, because until then, we don't know what's going to happen. So
Thank you
for
again,
having
Juan.
me.
Thank you, Juan, for your time.
Appreciate it.
Juan Nuñez is the Housing Committee President at Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. We're taking a quick break. Open BXRx will be right back. Welcome back. As productions finally start making a comeback in New York City, a new Black women-owned production company and rental studio in Harlem is seeking to help you create, inspire, and shine. Joining us now to share more about Real Gems is Christine Davis, the founder and CEO of Real Gems. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, first of all, congratulations on launching this production company. If you can just tell us a little bit about Real Gems and your mission, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So Real Gems, as you said, is a multi-purpose rental studio and we're a production company. And the mission is really just to create projects that are for us, like telling our stories, right? Because there's not enough stories out there that reflect, our everyday issues or things of that nature. So I want to make sure I created something that gives us a space for creatives like us to create those stories,
Beautiful thing. And Christine, you launched the studio space during COVID-19, right? What made you want to delve into the world of entrepreneurship at that moment? What exactly pushed you to make this happen?
You know what it was? I just saw how quickly, by the snap of your fingers, how you can be without a job instantly. And I figured, why am I subjecting myself to just being in that position? And at that moment, I figured I have to find a way to find several streams of income, whether it's through investments, starting my own business. And I figured that would be a great way to start that, having the multiple streams of income. So I said, today is the day. It's time. It's clearly the right time for me to do it. I had no fear. I didn't let COVID stop me. I felt like it just fueled me, actually. It really did fuel me to get it started.
I love that. And, as an actress yourself, what types of challenges do actors and creatives normally face in New York City? And how does Real Gems seek to provide solutions to some of these challenges?
The biggest challenge, I would say, definitely for actors and actresses specifically, is location. So most of the services that actors would need, like self-tape auditions, slate shots, the companies that provide those services are only downtown. They're only downtown. So sometimes, for instance, you would get a audition at the last minute and you need to run all the way downtown. Probably, depending on where you're at the top of the Bronx or even in Harlem, it can take you about 45 up to 2 hours to get down to that location. And then boom, you don't have the opportunity to do your self-tape. So location is one of the great reasons why we feel like we're a gem. Because it's in the middle, is right in the middle between Harlem and the Bronx. And that's one of the biggest issues, the location. And we provide great services for all creatives,
What are some of those services? Please share.
Yes. So we have our biggest service is the photography and video rental space. So you can rent the space to do those things. We have photo shoot sessions, video shoot sessions with our photographer and videographer. You can rent the space for meeting spaces where you can use it for production meetings, Zoom calls, other business meetings, podcasting services that I'm really excited about that we just launched. Then we also, you can also use the space for, we actually just finished up a demo reel for some actor. Oh. So we provide demo reel services. That's pretty much all of what we do. Yep.
Sounds amazing. And Real Gems provides some of the equipment for people to use.
Absolutely. We have all the cameras, all the backdrops, and the chairs, everything just comes with your package. The TV monitor that we have, everything comes with your package.
Got you. And one thing that people are worried about is, of course, COVID guidelines being followed in some of these spaces. So how does Real Gems keep the space safe for their clients?
Oh, we are totally big on that. So first and foremost, before you even book, you do receive a letter saying, okay, these are the requirements. You cannot enter the studio without a mask. If you do happen to show up without a mask, but we already have a stack of masks here waiting for you once you enter the door, you have to wash your hands. You can't even enter the studio space before you actually go into those are our new policies as of January. Before, you just use hand sanitizer, but now you have to actually go wash your hands, come inside. And then it's only up to 10 people in here at a time. More than 10, we have to monitor the surplus of people, and we just check back and forth to see who's in and out the studio like that. So we do a rotation if it's more than 10, but actually we don't do more than 10. But if we have to, but we clean after every booking, we clean. Every Friday it's a deep clean of the studio. We take that very seriously.
And where exactly are you guys located in Harlem, and why was it important for Real Gems to be in Harlem specifically?
Well, yes. It was, so the address of the space is 263 West 153rd Street in Harlem, New York 10039. It was important for it to be in Harlem because I am from Harlem. I was born in the Bronx, so I claim both worlds. That's why I'm catering to all, I'm catering to all my Bronx family, my Harlem family. I live in Harlem. The studio is literally 3 blocks away from where I live. And I kind of felt like, you know what, it's time for me to start seeing Black-owned businesses in the community that I live in. And for so long, I haven't seen any. I'm just like, I don't know, where are they? You know what I mean? So I thought it was really important for it to start in Harlem, and it's gonna stay in Harlem.
And Christine, you developed a relationship with like the building owners or something in order to establish the studio space? Because when I visited in the past, I've noticed that it was inside a building that already.
Yes.
How was developing that relationship with somebody?
Oh my gosh. So, you know, it's crazy how things come full circle. And I'm so glad you asked that question, because this space that I'm in, that Real Gems is currently in right now, was actually downstairs from where I currently live, 150th.
Wow.
And it was a center for kids back in the days before computers were a thing, to learn Adobe Photoshop, learn Premiere, make your own videos.
Wow.
Basically what I'm doing now is what I was doing almost 15 years ago. So I got a scholarship from the program, and they knew me. I just came to say, like, listen, I want to start this idea, and they just backed me 100%. And now I'm here. So just to see that come like full circle in a pandemic, absolutely crazy. I'm so grateful.
I love that. That's like the epitome of it takes a village, you know?
Absolutely.
It takes a village to raise a child.
So supportive of me.
That's beautiful. Christine, if you can just share the inception of Real Gems and how it came to fruition, the idea of your production company.
Absolutely. I totally love this story. I received a self-tape audition request from my manager, and it was due, I probably got it like late in the night, and it was due the following day. Like, and I'm like, how the heck am I going to make this happen? This is before Real Gems, obviously. So, you know, back at that time, I just had like a dingy backdrop, and not even a backdrop, it was just like cloth, and it was horrible. It wasn't ironed, it was wrinkly, and I'm just going crazy. I called my friend. I said, please come over and help me film this self-tape. And that's the biggest issue, not having a reader for your auditions. For a lot of actors, is really where it just like goes downhill from there. You know what I mean? So we just sat there like, this can't be our lives. I'm not gonna go all the way downtown to shoot this self-tape. I'm not gonna do it and pay all this money. I'm not gonna do it. Right. So I just sat there, and we both said, you know what? You should just do this. Like, you should just charge. I'm like, you're right. Why not? So a space for like us to be able to do that and have these auditions. Like, someone just came in the other day, last minute, I was there available. So just the availability for me, and being able to put the smile on those faces when they say, like, listen, this was so last minute. Thank you for just coming through for us, because this was really needed, because I didn't have time to go all the way downtown. Like, this is perfect location. And
apparently there's a need for it. So it's amazing that you came through at that moment too. You know, and something else I wanted to ask you is to please send the message to our local creatives here in the Bronx and in Harlem as well about the importance of keeping their craft up and creating during these times. I know a lot of us have been like a little down, you know, it's the pandemic. How can we just keep the spirits up, and what's the importance?
We have to keep creating. I think this is the best time to pull from this to keep creating. There is someone waiting to hear your story, to be inspired. Why cut that blessing off from someone else? You know what I mean? So keep creating. The world is waiting for us. People are really waiting for our stories, and it's up to us to tell those stories by all means necessary. So please keep creating. It's so important. It's vital. It's necessary. You know what I mean?
Thank you for that. And what's next for Real Gems? What can we expect to come next?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that. So we are working on a few productions. We have a feature film in the works that I'm so excited about. Right now, it's still in development, but by the end of March, it should move into pre-production. We have a series, an action comedy series. People that look like us are gonna be in it. I'm talking about like Asians, Latinos, I'm just so happy that I was able to create something where everybody can be involved. You know what I mean? It's time for us to tell our story. So that's actually in pre-production right now as we speak. So I'm really, really excited about that. Yeah.
So exciting. And without further ado, please invite people to connect with Real Gems and, you know, find out where you're located, any information that they need from you at this time.
Yes. So our website is www.realgems.com. That's our website. And then you can please follow us support us. I like to say support versus follow. I think it's a support thing. Support us on Real Gems on IG. Same thing. All social media handles is Real Gems, REELGEMS. And our phone number is 347-378-9878.
Thank you so much, Christine, for joining us today and sharing more.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yes. Christine Davis is the founder and CEO of Real Gems. You can follow her on all those social media platforms that she's provided right now and learn more about the production company online. That's all for our show today. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, wishing you and your family safety and wellness now and always. Take care.